Good evening, everyone. My name is Roshni, and I'm going to be your MC for tonight. So, just a little bit about me. I've been a student with the Brahma Kumaris since I was very young. Um, I'm a school student. I just finished school and I'm about to start university in just under a month, going to study medicine. So I'm really excited for that. And I think this talk is actually quite important. The talk today is about the art of communication. And communication, especially in the field of medicine, is such an important skill to be able to have. And I think it's a key skill that we should all really learn. I've noticed from personal experience how poor communication can often cause more damage to relationships because communication isn't just about exchanging information or sharing facts. It's really understanding the emotion behind it and the intentions behind the information that you're sharing. So I think that the art of communication is something that I definitely want to learn more about. And today we have two guest speakers with us who are going to be exploring this topic with us. Some of you might already know Pramjit Bai, and it's my pleasure to introduce him today. He's a student and a teacher of Raj Yoga meditation. He's been with the Brahma Kumaris for over 25 years, and he has extensive experience working with adults in education, fashion, and the building sector. And we also have today with us Minal, who has been exposed to the teachings of the Brahma Kumaris since the young age of 5. He's an actor and singer, and he works with some very prestigious theatres across the country. So both of these speakers are extremely experienced about this topic, and I'm really excited to hear from them today. Uh, so if you do have any questions throughout the talk, you can just leave them in the chat box and we can ask them at the end of the talk. So now I'd like to hand over to our speakers.
Thank you, Roshni. Om Shanti. Thank you for those kind introductions. Good evening, Minal. Om Shanti to you as well.
Hello, good evening. Om Shanti.
How was your day today?
It was good, thanks. Yeah, good.
Any singing today, or was it just acting, or was it behind the scenes only?
Just acting today, no singing, and no behind the scenes. Yeah.
You know, this art of communication is so important nowadays because I noticed that sometimes when things go wrong, people often say it was poor communication. And it is a nice topic to look at. So I was thinking, you know, where does communications first start? And I've realized for myself that the first thing I need to communicate is to communicate with myself. I need to be very open and honest with myself because sometimes, you know, if for instance, I have any defects and I ignore them, that will be reflected in how I interact with the world out there. Because if I'm deceiving myself, then I'm going to deceive others. So have you found that when you have communicated with yourself, how do you sort of interact with yourself?
I think that it kind of starts with an impulse for something to happen. Like it's usually maybe a situation or a relationship or a mindset that triggers my conversation with myself, because usually it's because something's uncomfortable. Maybe there may be times where something great has happened, and I certainly have. I'm developing the art of talking to myself when good things happen too. But usually it's when something is challenging and um, and it's interesting because I think what I do, at least, or what I find is maybe the communication is jarred when challenging situations come up, or relationships, and perhaps those are presented in the form of frustration or low mood or negative thinking. Generally speaking, I might think negatively about someone else. I might think negatively about myself. Oh, I should have done this. I should have done that. All of that is communication for me, just to myself, let alone thinking is communication, isn't it?
Mm.
I'm saying something in my head and I'm the only one who can hear it. So that is communication. And maybe we forget more often than we'd like to, that is what talking to ourselves is. But
I remember before doing meditation, there was a lot of things I would suppress because I didn't want to talk to myself about them. I was avoiding them. And of course, that's reflected in how I connect with the world out there. And when I started to sort of acknowledge my own weaknesses, I found it was quite easy to talk to people with pure intentions, in that there was honesty in my sort of connections with others. And it was often noticed that when I was sincere and honest with myself, and that came across in my tone of voice, in my body language, I found that I could really connect with people and people could connect with me. And suddenly, where there would have been barriers before, now there was openness. And now we could have what I would say a meaningful dialogue and relationship. Have you discovered that?
Yeah. I mean, it'd be interesting to know. I don't know if you have an example of a particular example where you had to change your intentions. How did you do that?
Well, I think before, we say something, but internally we're thinking something else, and it can be the opposite. And people pick up those vibrations. They know that what I'm maybe saying is, yes, it makes sense, but somehow there's not that passion. It doesn't feel it's coming from the heart, and I'm just saying it for the sake of saying it. So I know that when I was interacting with some of my family members, I think I was very critical of them, but I wouldn't express that in my words to them because I knew that they were a little bit sensitive. And even though I was, externally very kind to them, very polite to them, but I think they picked up that maybe I wasn't as sincere as I was. But since doing meditation, that's all changed. I found that I have a wonderful relationship when I connect with people. And I think that all comes down to, first, is that I've let go of the past. And one of the things I've learned is don't hold things of the past. And I've had a variety of roles to play as a senior manager in adult education. And then I was in fashion. I was answering to other people. And one thing I've discovered is, more than anything else, be very open and clean and clear with everyone. Don't have any mixed feelings on the inside.
Yeah, it's interesting because unlike you, I didn't have a life before, or I don't remember my life before meditation. so that's why it's interesting to hear your perspective, because you were very, you were much older when you started meditating than I was. And even though I hadn't committed myself to the meditation practice until I was a bit older, it's kind of been in my life the whole time. So I've been able to think about it. So for me, the version of that for me is exactly what you said, actually. I learned quite early on to help to understand, for my own benefit, actually, let alone someone else's, but to understand where someone is coming from. And I remember this tidbit that I picked up along the way that has been really helpful for me, which is every time you see someone, especially people that you think you know very well, treat them as if it's the first time you're meeting them, and possibly treat them as if it's your last. They say that because anything could happen to any of us anytime. So the things that challenge us from doing that or stop us from doing that are the things to work on, are the things to let go of in communication. So then it becomes for me has been a really useful tool. I don't know when the last time I saw you in person was. I've known you for a long time, but I don't know when the last time I saw you in person was. And I just like to think that possibly also what it does help us to do is to help us to respect each other, regardless of what people are like and what they've done to us. And it stops us to go down that road of overthinking, I guess, people, because everyone is so different. And one thing I find with my work, I'm working on a play at the moment, and every actor is unique in their role, and I can't treat two people the same because they have different purposes. So I can't treat my mom the same way that as I treat my sister or my brother or whatever, or my work colleague is the same way as I treat another work colleague, because as human beings we're very different. Perhaps we start to recognize we are recognizing people as their job role rather than as who they really are.
I remember when I was, you said I've known you for a long time. I actually remember you when you were this high, and you and your brother used to come to the sort of retreats that we used to have for the Kumars, and the wonderful times. But I tell you what I've learned when I was given the role of sort of helping conduct children's class, is my communication skills really improved. Because, when you said, you got to treat everybody like the first and the last time, and you got to treat people with respect. It's interesting how we interact with children, and we can learn so much about ourselves. So when I first interacted with them, it was, I'm up here and they're down here. A lot of these were sort of 8-year-old, sort of 7-year-olds, and up to their sort of early teens. So there were different heights. And I was always looking down at them, and when I was talking to them. And then I realized that actually one of the greatest respect I can do was to have eye-to-eye communication. So what I would then do was I would actually sort of kneel down, and I would come down, and I would see them on a level. And you know what? They really appreciated that. I don't think they said anything, but I think that got rid of any arrogance. I'm better than you, because working and interacting with children, you learn so much about yourself, because children are so honest. They're so to the point, and they don't hold back. Whereas adults, we tend to sometimes become very defensive. And of course, we don't always speak what we want to speak, and this creates long-term problems. So working with children, or working with, sometimes vulnerable people, I think you learn how to interact with absolute honesty. And you know what? They love you for that.
Yeah. I think for me as well, what I completely agree about children. I don't think they've learned the art of overthinking. I think what stops us from, well, at least what stops me from saying what I'm thinking, is that I overthink what people are going to think of me. Is it the right thing to say? I start to go down this road of possibly my negative traits, as you mentioned earlier, kick in, and I think, oh, maybe that's not a sensible thing to say, or and so sometimes we think that maybe kids aren't intelligent, but I think they're extremely intelligent. They just don't know it. They just don't know how they're intelligent, but they are. They have a very natural sense of, because they're still learning, and I think that's a big part of communication. Is the reason we communicate is so that we can learn, so that we can pick up something, we can understand something better, we can like in a play or in a performance of some kind, TV. So the whole reason we have that is so that we're learning something new. We're teaching. The actor's perspective is that we're trying to get a story across to you, whether it's for entertainment, whether it's for education, whatever the reason is. But fundamentally, our job is to make sure that what I'm doing is very clear. That's what makes a good actor. That's what makes good acting, is that clarity. That I'm if me, Minal, is overthinking too much about what my character should or shouldn't be doing, should or shouldn't be thinking, then Minal comes in the way of an audience understanding. And so it's really interesting that perspective. And I think children are like that. They don't overthink too much. Maybe now they start a bit earlier than they used to overthink, because there's a lot more pressure on them. But I think the overthinking element is, for me, is really important. And I have to learn continuously to catch my overthinking mind and to tell it, all of that is rubbish. And none of it is what if you really whittle it down to, there was this really great exercise I've done in my job, but also, on retreats, spiritual retreats, meditation retreats that I've been on or done, where if you think about a difficult, challenging situation in your life, and could be anything, something that you feel challenged by, and you write a list of all the things that you write a list of what is happening in that, what are the facts about that situation. So it involves these people, it makes me feel this way, the facts, what you think are the facts about that particular situation. And then if you take out all of the emotion from that and you just see pure fact, this person's involved, you start to realize how much I potentially am making this a big thing in my head. And it's a great way of realizing how much we think too much about particular things, and it stops us from knowing what to do to resolve the situation, but also it puts us in a position where we feel helpless, and we feel that we can't be honest. And I think by separating the emotions from the fact of the situation, helps us to be honest, and then we can say, oh, actually, you know what? Because honesty is not just about telling the truth. It's about seeing the reality of a situation. For me, I don't know if that's your experience of it.
Well, actually, I recall a situation. It was actually with your brother, Jayesh.
Okay.
And I don't know if you remember that we used to go to this Polish scout house in Wales. Yeah. And it was in the middle of nowhere. And I think Jayesh at the time was about 15 years of age. And of course, he's been a bit, very laddish sort of type of behavior. And they're in that group of people. And when you with a certain type of image that you have, so you tend to have a different approach, how you connect with others. Well, anyway, we were doing a meditation session, and he had tears in his eyes. He was actually crying, and because he obviously had a sort of like a spiritual awakening that took place. And some of the others of his same age were poking fun at him because, how does a male, of his age cry? Because only who are weak cry. So I remember at the time, it was really I actually understood what he was experiencing. And so there was a lot of empathy for him. So one of the things you learn when you have communication is you learn empathy skills. So I remember taking him to one side and says, no, this is fine. It happens. And then in a sort of a big gathering, I sort of spoke to people why this happens, etc. And the interesting thing was, after that, I had a lot of one-to-one sessions with all the others. So it's amazing that when you open up, and you can understand where they're coming from, it's suddenly you open channels where people can say, I feel very comfortable in talking to you. So if we're going to learn the art of communication, especially at home with our families. And sometimes I feel that families do not talk to each other at all. Even they live together, they're in the same room, most of their life is together. They don't have this art of how to connect because they're very much from one perspective only. So I think a good communicator definitely knows how to show empathy.
Definitely. And the more we see, I always try and bring it back to why am I doing something? Why am I? For me, it's twofold. One is to help myself and to change the way that I'm experiencing life. I don't want to be sad and depressed and anxious and all the time. I don't want to feel challenged by life all the time. There must be a more happy way of living and a more peaceful way of living. So that's one thing that encourages me to want to change the way that I am, to want to find a more neutral or natural way of being, I think. And I've seen it in practice. I see other people do it. I see examples in other people. I think, wow, that is amazing that it's possible for you, which means it must be possible for me. Even that, like the beauty I find about Raj Yoga really, or any meditation, spiritual practice, that people have are on a genuinely, I find that they become an example of how I would like to live my life. And there are, it might just be one interaction or one thing that they've done, and it's like blowing my mind. I'm going, gosh, that is possible. If one person can do it, it's possible for every single one of us. But obviously, then we engage on the journey, and we have to pay attention to it, and learn how to do that. Learn the skill. So that's one thing. But the other thing is about being kind to others and making their experience of life a good one as well. I think communicating is not just about us, and it's not just about them. It's about the two of us in the situation. So we could be, and I'm sure a lot of us are probably very good at this, telling other people what their flaws are and what they can change, and what we're good at being directors, but we're not very good at taking notes and being actors and making a change in ourselves, possibly because our ego is flared, or possibly because if someone gives us a note, we don't know how to put it into practice, possibly because someone gives us a note, then it confuses us, or we start overthinking, we start having self-doubt, and all that kind of stuff comes in the way. But really, I think the art of the communication is to learn to sift through all of that and be aware that it's a two-way process. If I want to be honest to someone else, then if I have to be open, and if I want to communicate well, then I have to also be willing to receive the communication back. Otherwise it's just one way. It's not communication. It's just talking, or I don't even know what to call it really.
I think you're right when you talk about communication. It is a relationship. I remember on one instance, and where you were talking about, you have to learn and how to communicate. I was talking with Bukumbai over the phone. Bukumbai, if you don't know, is the sort of center coordinator at Leicester Brahma Kumaris. And this was in my early days. I must have been about a few years practicing meditation. And often he would ring me up. And I'm the type of person who doesn't like long conversations over the phone, because everyone has their own style of connecting, and they want to keep it short and sweet. And that's my sort of background. I like to get to the point. Well, anyway, he was talking, and I assumed he'd finished, and I would acknowledge it, and I said, okay, and there was nothing, and then I would hang up. I would hang up in those days. We didn't have a mobile phone; it was a landline. And he rings me back, and he says, "I haven't finished." I said, "I thought you finished," because there was a pause, and I thought that was it. And he says, "No, okay, I've just got a few other things," and it was generally not worth the energy, but nevertheless, he made a point. And what happened? This happened several times. I would actually hang up because I assumed that he had finished, and then I thought, there's something here that I need to learn about myself. What is it that's causing this issue that he's having to ring me back? And I realized it was really my ego. Yeah, it was like I'm trying to control the conversation. And so I learned something very precious, and I have never forgot that lesson. It's like you say, you learn something and you adapt it to your next sort of challenges. And so when he phoned the next time, I was ready. I said, "Bukumbai, is there anything else?"
Yeah.
and you know what?
Space for more communication.
Yeah, he started to laugh. He appreciated well, there was a turning point. And suddenly there was that, yeah, we're now on the same page. We know how to communicate, how to respect each other. And of course, when we interact with others, we have these habits, and our habits are the drivers of how we interact. So we're very lovey-dovey with some people, but short and shrift with someone else. So you learn that actually, that when you are sincere with others, you acknowledge them, then there's communication, because communication is the art of connecting. It's not conveying my message, but okay, I convey my message, but did you understand what I was saying? And that comes about when you sort of push aside, as you said, your ego, and you say, okay, let me have the humility to learn from this situation on what this person is saying to me.
Yeah. There's I heard something recently, in two different ways, actually. I heard it in two different situations, one at work and one from something that I was watching, a documentary. And it's like, in the documentary, it was all about male suicide in men, and suicide and losing people and what that really is. And the thing that they said was that one of the groups was talking about was that they're starting to ask groups of male friends are starting to ask each other, are you okay? And then they ask again, are you really okay? Because often the first response that we have is, yeah, we're fine. And then the second response is, in their situation, the second response is, no, but genuinely, are you really okay? And then if there's something they need to share off, then they do, And it's a really great way to get people talking and get, especially men, because it's a big thing for males to not, like you were saying before, for them not to share so openly about the challenges they face, especially if it's emotional stuff. It's also a challenge for women too, but I just thought that was fascinating, because, we don't always communicate, like we say, don't always communicate what we're feeling, possibly for whatever reason it is. It could be traumatic, or we don't have time. If you're passing by someone and someone says, are you okay? Often you just say, yeah, I'm fine, because you don't have time to talk and chat, which is also fine. That's okay. But if there is the opportunity to dig a little deeper and to really get, it could take a few more minutes of our time to do that, and we would have communicated in a much more effective way, because I know, I'm sure there are situations that I can't think of any right now, but there are definitely situations that I've been in where someone may have given me more time than was necessary, because I needed to get something off my chest, or just ask them a question, or even just engage in a conversation, especially, if you've been isolated for a long period of time, in this time, to talk to someone and, communicating with each other, really communicating, sharing what's on your mind and sharing what's on your heart. And that has been, I'm sure, has saved many lives. For me, I know that people have done that for me, and I know that I've done that for other people, just asking them, are you really okay? And empathizing with them. That must be challenging for you, whatever you're facing. And I'm sorry you have to deal with that. Learning that language is also learning the art of communication, isn't it?
Yes.
Knowing how to respond to the challenges of others. Perhaps because we've all got our own stuff to deal with. We don't all have the capacity we don't understand how to deal with the challenges that other people are dealing with. Maybe we think, we start to give them advice and we start to be, virtuous. And maybe that's not what they need. Maybe what they really need is just someone to listen.
I think that this aspect of listening is so important. We're, as you said, we're very good at telling others, but I think we need to listen, not just listen for the sake of listening, because otherwise sometimes what happens is people are just offloading whatever they're doing. And if we're not careful, we're completely ignoring them. But they might as well talk to a brick wall.
Yeah.
And I think when we listen, there needs to be active listening. And there needs to be acknowledgement that, when they say something, I don't have to say it. I just nod my head, or there's a bit of a sort of expression on my face. So I'm communicating sort of non-verbally, but acknowledging what they're saying, and I'm showing respect to them, because if we're in a difficult relationship, the worst thing we can do is nonchalantly just nod our heads and say, yeah. And I just want you to finish your speech, so then I can get my penny's worth in it. And I think one of the skills that we need to develop as a good communicator is listening, is not to interfere. And I know from my own experience, as I said, I used to like a very short and sharp answers. Even before meditation, I was, it was a part of my role. I didn't have time for long stories. And so I would, if I felt somebody had spoken too much, I would cut them off. and I'm sure I hurt people's feelings, because it happens. And then as I started to understand myself a lot better, I became much more softer. And now I feel that I don't cut people off just because they're on the wrong page or they've got a difference of opinions. I do listen, and I will listen them. And one of the things I've learned is that patience is a real virtue when it comes to communicating.
Definitely. It's I think maybe when we're listening to people that are pushing our buttons or are oversharing or something like that, often maybe what's going on in our mind, coming back to this thing that we started with of what's happening in our minds, talking to ourselves, what is the communication happening in our mind? Even while someone's talking to us, what in that situation, what can happen is we start thinking, oh, I wish they'd shut up, or I wish they'd finish, or I really need to get somewhere, or I really need to do this. And that is what makes us feel bad. That is what makes us feel frustrated. It's not the fact that they're talking to us and sharing. It's the fact that I'm thinking about the frustrations of this situation. Whereas if I was if my intention was clean, like you were talking about, and my attitude towards them was open and one of share, really like share. I'll be a pair of ears, I'll let it go in my ear. It won't just go out the other one, but I also won't let it sit on my heart. I won't let it sit in my mind and think about it all the time. So it's like really listening is an art, a whole other thing in itself. But if I can do that, then often I've found, and when I've practiced that for myself, is that the time goes quicker. I might get to the thing that I'm trying to get to earlier. They feel listened to, they feel heard. I feel just generally my well-being is good as well, because I haven't engaged in this kind of unnecessary, battle of overthinking, I guess, in a way. And it kind of comes to me, the ability to be able to do that, the skill, the art to be able to do that, comes out of a very simple and core meditation practice. To me, that is, what Raj Yoga teaches is to come back to who I am, and experience who I am in my meditation, so that I'm able to effectively be who I am when I'm performing, when I'm performing in life, when I'm acting, when I'm speaking. And I think that maybe we don't always give the importance to the meditation practice when it comes to things. I love, one of my favorite things to do is to be able to bring every one of our conclusions and our solutions to life's problems can come back to a very simple core meditation practice. For me, I don't know what your experience of that has been, how you have been, what you gain from meditation, from your meditation practice, and how that has impacted a particular situation or a particular relationship. You mentioned it a little bit before, but I don't know if you've got any stories or if you've got an anecdote.
I think, when you said, what have I gained from meditation? I think Buddha was once asked the question, what have you gained from meditation? And he says, I don't know what I've gained from meditation, but I tell you what I have lost: anger, ego, arrogance, attachment. And I think when we practice meditation, it is that we're looking at our own selves, and I'm really looking at myself with a very a very kind vision. It's a vision where I'm not judging myself. In the past, I was very critical of myself. And of course, that was reflected in how I interact with others. Since doing meditation, it's changed. And my body language has changed. My body language has changed enormously because one of the ways we communicate is through our signals of the body. I mean, I remember when I used to have a fallout with my wife, Harinda. She's also, by the way, she also does meditation. She actually got me into meditation. And I think I was dragged and kicking into meditation, but it certainly made sense from the first lesson. I've never looked back, and I've got to be grateful to her. So when I had those moments of disagreement, and I couldn't just walk out of the room or the house, etc. I had to be in the house. And so what was my body language? I would pretend that that person was not there.
Yeah.
So it's like I'm giving them the cold shoulder. And I'm saying into my, you do not exist. I'm trying to effectively shut them out. And of course, they're picking the vibrations up, and then maybe they're doing the same to me. And one of the things we do a lot when we don't have that sort of self-respect is that we communicate in such a way, and people pick it up, like saying, making those gestures, signals that really sort of causes a lot of offense. And what is this? Nothing more than anger. Now it's different, because if there's something that causes concern, I'm able to address it. One of the things I've learned through meditation is don't allow things to simmer.
Yeah.
Don't allow things to escalate. What I've noticed is that one of the best ways to interact with people, whether it's at home or work, and I've got many examples in all of those, is you deal with it there and then. And by dealing with it, you stop things from escalating, where people start thinking in the wrong way, or they make a lot of assumptions. And who gets into trouble? We all do.
Yeah. It's interesting because I continue to go through the process of saying what is needing to be said, when it has to be said, rather than holding on to it. And you find situations where actually it's like following my instinct, learning to follow my instinct. Do I need to share something? If there's an impulse to share, then I will share it. But I always check my emotional state before I do, because sometimes we might react to something rather than coming from an impulse to share. And I think that a good way of checking, so if someone's pushing my buttons, I might think the best thing to do here is to shout at them, to get angry, to swear at them, to do all sorts of things, right? And on all levels, thinking, words, and action. I might even end up hitting them or hurting them or doing something, physical, which could be really dangerous. It is dangerous. But what I find myself doing more and more often, and it's become so natural for me that I continue having to practice it, but it's become a really good practice now. And so is I check if something has triggered an emotional reaction in me, a negative emotional reaction in me, whatever that is, all levels of it. Calm down from that before I share something, or heal, allow yourself to heal in that. It might take years, it might take days, it might take hours, it might take seconds. And I think the more we do it, the quicker it gets, the healing, the settling gets. And because it's no use sharing or communicating when we're in a state of emotional turmoil, because it's not communication, it's just arguing. It's you start doing that thing where what you say is more important than what the other person's saying, and you start having a one-way conversation, even though you're talking to each other, or neither of you are listening. So eventually you might get to a stalemate, and you say, okay, we can't have this conversation now, let's go and cool off and come back. But if we can encourage ourselves and find that practice, I know that it's been really, really useful for me. And what it's more than that, what it's helped me to do is to be more courageous about sharing my opinion in a meeting or sharing my perspective. I'm not a big fan of the word opinion, but my perspective, to develop the self-respect to listen to someone, you know, rather than because we know how it feels, you know, you start to become very naturally empathetic. And also, just coming back to the meditation practice, I love what you said, because it's so true. It's not about gaining something. It's about allowing other things to fall away, isn't it? So maybe if we go into a meditation practice with that mindset, that I'm going into it to melt things on a hot summer's day, rather than to build icicles, or, you know, that kind of feeling of, it's about allowing my meditation practice to heal me. And then I'll find that, you know, I will naturally become a good communicator, and I'll become an artist when it comes to communicating. And the other thing that I just wanted to mention was, when it comes to the meditation practice, is that when you really spend time doing that, when you really give yourself space and time, and for me, Raj Yoga works really well, it heals me, then you're able to see each individual for who they are, because you actually start to melt away your preconceptions about individuals. Because you're giving yourself, I don't know, there's something about giving yourself space and time, giving yourself, you know, having good conversations in your head. You know, if something's just like a parent would with a child, or a guardian would with their child, it's that you start to be able to, even if, you know, you were to speak to twins or people who you think have exactly the same mindset about everything, you know, they might agree on everything, but they're still individuals, you know, they're still physically, even they're still individuals, you know. I think you start to develop that understanding unconsciously that everyone is an individual, and I'm also an individual, and I think then life becomes less, for me, life has become less stressful.
I think, you know, when you talk about individuals, I remember before my meditation days, I used to also be a production manager. I used to sort out productions. And, you know, one of the things that came across, I didn't see them as individuals. I saw them like that. They were there to do and follow my orders. And if they didn't follow them, orders was that there was a certain amount of friction. There was a bit of tension and raised voices as well. But that changed when, as I said, you look at yourself and you become much more sort of gentler and softer on the inside, which is then sort of revealed on the outside. When I moved into adult education, I was given an opportunity to manage, and I quickly moved into roles where I was managing other managers. And I remember people coming to me and says, you know, I really would like to be in your team, you know. And I thought, oh, so kind of them. I didn't say anything. I says, you know, the reason was because everyone who was in my team was treated with respect, and there was no like telling people off, but it was more like, okay, what could we do better? You know, where is the gaps that we can fill? Collectively, we can all move forward. And I remember managing 6 managers who managed other admin staff, etc. So, and they knew more than I knew in what they were doing. But what I was good at was that I was free from emotions. There was no baggage with me. So I was not judging people. Yeah. And because I was looking things more objectively, I was able to see things very clearly, which others didn't see. So in that respect, I was actually employed to make decisions, not to be cleverer than someone else. I acknowledged that you have more knowledge than me. But what I would like you to do is let's look at what's good for the organizations, what's good for the team, what's good for all the stakeholders involved. And you know what? Getting people on board in that respect enabled me to have a much more comfortable life. It was a very sort of easy life, even though that it had these moments of challenge. And I think that's one of the things that you learn when you communicate, is like, you've got to think about everything and everyone. It's a 360 degrees vision of people, of the situations. It's not just like, well, what's in it for me or what's in it for them. It's like, I'm trying to make a decision that will be beneficial to everyone. So that only comes about when you're free from the baggages of position and what your expectations are. So easy to communicate on that level.
Yeah, there was this model that I found that I think might be useful to share with people. So, because I know we're talking about our own experiences here, but and that very valid, I'm sure. I know, but it's always useful to back it up with some sort of research and science. But I remember quite a few years ago, I came across this this man called Albert Mehrabian, who was a communication specialist, and he actually did lots of extensive research on communication. And his findings, essentially, I mean, they're much more detailed than this, but he came to a conclusion that out of a pie chart, 100%, there are particular percentages that of communication that pertain to different aspects of how we communicate. And so he said that 7% of, and this is most people don't guess this correctly if I ask you to guess, but I'm just going to tell you because I'm aware of time. But he said that 7%, right? 7% of communication in general, of our communications, of our feelings and our attitudes, are expressed through our words, what we say. Only 7%. Are expressed through what we say. And then 38% of our feelings and attitudes are expressed through how we say those words. So if I was to say, I love you, you don't get it. That's only 7%. You're only getting 7%, right? If I said it with more feeling, you'd get 38 plus 7%, right? So then there's another 55% left from the pie chart, and that comes across through our facial expressions and our body language. And so it's amazing, because if you were to take out the words and you were to take out how you say the words, 55% of my body language is still effectively communicating with you. Like you said before, if you give someone the cold shoulder or something like that. But it just goes to show that really deep down, if we can find the opportunity to refocus what's happening in our minds to help heal ourselves through meditation, and to understand what needs healing, to accept what needs healing, to be honest with that, then it becomes a successful journey, to be less stressful, to be less frustrated, angry, etc.
I tell you, one of the best ways of communicating is silence. The power of silence is amazing. And I just remember daddies of the organization, Brahma Kumaris, Daddy Prakash Mani, Daddy Gulzar, Daddy Janki, and they communicated a lot just through their eyes. They didn't say anything, and you felt the warmth and the love. And I thought, yeah, this is fine. And you don't have to say anything. As you say, it's not a question of what you say; it's how you made me feel. I think that's one of the first thing about communication is, how do I make others feel? Absolutely. How do others make me feel? Yes. So with that, you automatically are able to connect. So I find that nowadays, I don't have to have the last word. I don't have to prove anything. I just have to be me. And if I have to choose a timing is also very important when I'm communicating through emails or sound, but I know that this is the right time, and I choose my words very carefully, because I know that every word has a profound impact. Even on an email, I can tell whether someone is angry or not, whether somebody is sincere or not. I'm not the type of person who would write in capital letters, because I know that usually that's a sign of, yeah, it's anger. But I do know that sometimes it's choosing the words has a profound impact on others, and when to use them.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. It's we could keep going. I'm just aware. I don't know if there are any questions from those who are listening, or if there's anything that anyone would like to share.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know if that's a good time. There's one thing that I had quite early on, actually, from someone, which was, if you were going to listen to someone, you need time. And I wonder what your thoughts on that are.
Sometimes, because I go to work, I do my meditation in the morning, and I attend and listen to our spiritual classes. But I also have a responsibility, because I manage 8 people, and often they swear a lot. It's not that they are swearing, but it's just their, you can say, their nature. But they're actually very kind, and they apologize when they're in my presence if a swear word comes out. But yes, I do choose my times very carefully. I am, if I'm in a hurry, I will say, yes, I will give you time, but now is not the time, because I have to do other things. So I also prioritize things, but I don't want to do it, leave me alone, I'm in a hurry. No, I will make time. And I tell you, I learned a very good lesson from one of our seniors in the Brahma Kumaris, and that's Sister Jenti. She gets so many emails from all over the world, but the one thing she does, she will always acknowledge those emails. And that's one thing I've also learned as well. If anyone sends me an email, it may not be immediate, but they will get an acknowledgement, because it's showing that you are important. But sometimes I cannot give you that time just immediately.
Yeah, definitely. It's something that there's a lot of information out there about active listening and compassionate listening, and it's just whether or not we choose to. It comes down, really, it's as simple as that. We could do as much research, but to put it into practice, to put all of this, I guess, into practice about communication, eventually it's about whether or not I see the benefit for myself and for other people, and then the impact that has on generally, on our lives, and then eventually the world. What could that do? Yeah.
I'm going to bring Roshni in, because Roshni, welcome back. I remember Roshni when she was young as well. She used to, because one of my I consider a great fortune is working with children, young adults, and I've seen them grow and mature, and they've learned so much, and I've learned so much from them. And I always remember Roshni. She's always had that lovely smiling face. She was so gregarious, she was very engaging, everything. Wonderful cultural programs. I remember those days at RGRC.
Thank you. So we have a few questions come in for you. So the first one is about tips. If you have any tips how to have more energy when listening to people, because it can become quite challenging to pay attention and keep up the same level or quality of active listening. So do you have any tips on how to have more energy when listening, and how to put boundaries when you realize that your levels of energy are slightly diminishing?
I'll give that to you.
I find it really useful to be in a meditative space when I'm listening to someone, so that I'm not thinking about what they're saying, and that gives me enough energy, and it also holds a space for someone to share authentically. I find that if I'm getting tired of listening to someone, if my energy is depleting, perhaps I'm not in the right frame of mind to really listen to them. So maybe it's better to say, do you mind if we do this another time? I'm really happy to listen to you, but find a better opportunity. Just like Pramjit said earlier, if it's not the right time, even if I do have time, but I'm not in the right energy, yeah, that for me would be a tip, I guess, is to make sure that you're in a meditative space or a calm space, a peaceful space.
Boundaries are important as well, because sometimes when people want to share something about, especially about others, and they're trying to manipulate you to see their point of view. So my boundaries is that, yes, I'm willing to listen, but as long as it's relevant and appropriate. But if you go over that and start trying to sort of badmouth or put people down, then I will say stop. There's nothing wrong in being very clear that if you have certain principles, you have to abide by them, and so you need to treat people with respect. And I don't want to hear what someone else is like because they've got some sort of their own battles that are taking place. I really don't want to get involved and say, look, park it. But what is relevant? Let's remain focused.
Thank you. And the next question we have is, how would you communicate with a manager who doesn't have very diplomatic language skills when they're trying to communicate with you? So they're not necessarily empathizing with you. Maybe they don't understand when things haven't gone right. So how would you communicate with a person who doesn't necessarily have those skills?
I think in that instance, whatever you do, try to choose your moment, but do so on a if possible, have a personal meeting and speak honestly, but don't sort of tell everyone about it. It's very important that you keep it isolated and explain your reasons why. I mean, I'm sure they have their own reasons as well, but I find that managers often they'll have a lot of sort of key targets to hit, and it's a lot of performance related, but also they may be carrying a lot of baggage from home as well, because that's what I find with a lot of people. It's not that you're dealing with a manager or you're dealing with that. You're dealing with someone who have so many problems, but speak to them with honesty and clarity, and just to say, look, I understand this, but perhaps if I'm lacking, I apologize. And so I want to become a better person. How can I do that? So you can interact with that person, but do so with the utmost humility. Don't put them down. You are the worst manager I've ever met, etc. You're just asking for trouble.
Yeah, and just the last question. So you're talking about the emotions sometimes that come across when you are talking with people, engaging, communicating. So if people such as close friends and family are talking to you and they're projecting their emotions onto you during a conversation, how do you not get affected by that?
That is a good question. I don't know whether the purpose is just to not get affected in the first instance. I would just because if they're, especially if they're family or very close friends, old friends that we've got a lot of history with, you can't just switch it off in a moment. It takes time to work through that. So I would just start by catching what is happening in my mind when someone is talking to me, when that family member is talking to me, and learn to quieten that and practice quietening that mind, that voice in my head, so that I can really be listening to someone, rather than actively trying to stop being hurt and all that kind of stuff, because I don't think that's ever going to work in the situation. You can work on that outside of the situation, but when you're in front of them and they're talking to you, it's not really, it's a kind of a process for me, at least. So I would really engage in practicing good listening and trying to decipher between what are the thoughts that I'm having are necessary and what isn't. And then you'll be able to figure out your own process.
I just want to, I use a technique that I've learned through meditation, is having good wishes and pure feelings for people. And that's at a vibrational level. So sometimes you can't openly talk, or they're not willing to listen, and I'm not willing to listen. There may be bad feelings from the past. But the way to heal it, I've discovered for myself, is always send out good wishes to that person. So what I would do, I would visualize that person, and I would send whatever pure thoughts I had. I would say, literally say these type of things. You are a peaceful soul. You are a loving soul. You're a kind one. And the amazing thing is, it does have an effect on them. And suddenly, there's opportunities, there's windows opening where you can actually communicate and start talking. And then suddenly, before you know it, whatever was holding back seems to go.
Thank you so much for such an engaging talk and for answering everybody's questions. Sorry for those who didn't get their questions answered, but I'm sure there will be some way for you to find the answer. Will we be able to have a quick meditation, Vinod, just for a couple of minutes,
Sure,
just to close off? Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Paramjit. So just invite you to relax in your chair, and feel free to keep your eyes open or close your eyes, whatever feels comfortable for you on a Friday night. Enough so that you feel engaged and not sleepy. If your eyes are open, then just find a focus in front of you somewhere soft. And take a few deep breaths in and out, relaxing breaths. Really feel your body sink into whatever you're sat in, the chair or the floor. Maybe take a few audible breaths, inhale, exhale, just to really relax your bodies. Adjust if you need to. It's like a sigh of relief. And the more we relax, the more we come to a very natural state of being. We stop holding on. It becomes easier to just let go and refocus our minds. Just for a short moment, if I turn inwards and experience this relaxation in my body, but also beneath that is a feeling, an energy of peace, stillness, that just exists. Through no control of my own. It's like a river of peace that runs through me. A river of stillness, serenity, calm. And I pose the question, I reflect on the idea that this is who I am. When I'm doing nothing, when I'm being no one, that this feeling of peace is who I am. I just hold on to that feeling for a few moments longer. Relish that feeling. Perhaps even take it into the rest of my evening, my weekend. Om Shanti.
Thank you, Minal, for that lovely meditation, and thank you to both our speakers today. We've got lots of comments in the chat box saying big thank you for such a wonderful talk. So our topic next week is by Sister Denise. Some of you might have heard her before, and it's about the power of tolerance. So look forward to seeing you there next week.